Hey everybody, I'm making this video for people to have a better understanding of finger stretches, right? What it means to be able to have a wide stretch on the piano. And I think oftentimes this is misunderstood as simply just finger stretch, how far those fingers are able to stretch from one another. While that is important, there's another part of this that I think is missed by a lot of people, and especially, in the first few years of playing piano, and that is there are other parts of the equation and other parts of our movement that have a dramatic impact on how far we can reach. And those are wrist movements and forearm movements. And I'll talk about the basic movements of those going forward. But first, let's go through an exercise to develop finger stretch. Okay, one of my favorite ones to use is a very, very simple whole tone position. I'm gonna go ahead and give you a little bit more on this camera here on the bottom, so you can see what's going on there. And this shows you just a little bit more of my wrist and more of my forearm. Okay. So here we go. I'm in a whole tone position: E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, C. And now I'm going to take each finger through this, trying to find the boundaries of how far each one can travel, while I gently rest the other fingers down on their notes. So the hands loose, just the weight of the arm holding the notes down. I'm not digging in the notes. I'm not pressing. And I have a gentle curve. All these, the bones, ligaments, and, the knuckles are loose. I have a lot of, movement there. It's just not seized, right? Okay. So now at this point, I'm going to start with one finger at a time, and I'm going to start with the thumb, and I'm just going to move up and down and find the boundaries of each finger's stretch. Okay. So there's on C. I'm going to head down now. B, find the B flat. I'm going to play it even though it's down. The A, G sharp, G, F sharp, that's a tough one. I got it kind of with the nail of the thumb. And then F, it's fine. E, I can reach that. Back up now. Can't go farther than the E, okay? C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, nope. I'm going to stop there. So I don't really want to push it without having a good understanding of what I was talking about in the beginning of this, which is understanding wrist movement and understanding forearm positions, so that we don't have to flirt with injury, okay? Because you really don't want to start to push it without having a better understanding of what it takes to manipulate a position to increase stretch. That's coming next. Okay, but first I want to understand the boundaries of each finger. Okay, so second finger's next. So remember that, first of all, what I was able to do, which was the thumb was able to barely get to the E. I mean, the F was pretty comfortable on the way down. And then on the way up, I could barely get to that G. Okay, now, second finger. I'm going to go up first. Might as well cross over the thumb. C sharp and D. I got it. But I noticed my third finger really kind of slipping off that note there and wanting to head to the A. And that's obviously not helping me, right? Because then that's just changing the position that I was starting with. So I'm trying to stretch out those fingers. And again, I don't want to push it to the point where it just feels like I'm going to injure myself. That is not what this is about. I want to understand the boundaries, okay? So went up. I got to D. We'll talk about that. You maybe saw a little bit of a manipulation of the other movements out, just other than the fingers, right? This is going to be important coming up. Okay, so third finger's next. Or no, I didn't go down yet. So A. There's my A flat. There's my G. Feels awkward. That's about it. G, right? Okay. Third finger. G sharp. Gonna go up. These middle fingers are not going to do very well. It's just the way it is. When you think of hand stretches, you think about 1 to 5, right? That's primarily what we're dealing with here. And a little bit in terms of like neighboring fingers, getting them far enough apart. Okay, I was able to get to the A, which actually helps with, improving this stretch between the 4 and the 5, or 4 and the 3. Okay, this is important for large chords, 5-note chords. Okay, there's my A sharp. I'm not going to get farther than that. I'm not even going to try it. Okay, now G. F sharp. Got it. Not going to get lower than that. All right, 4th finger. I'm going to quickly go through these. So 4, going to go up. Yeah. That's just not going to happen. I got 1 note. I got G. I'm not going to hit G sharp. That doesn't mean that my 5 to my 4s is a minor third, and that's all I'll ever be able to get. That is not true. In fact, I can get that, right? But it's the other fingers were down on these notes, you see? So it's increasing the stretch, having a good understanding of the stretch while the others are being, kind of forced into a particular position, right? Force is a bad word, but being stuck into this particular chord shape. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go down. F's fine. I'm not gonna hit the E with the other fingers locked into those notes. Okay, 5th finger now. Last one. Here we go. So up, G. Can't even get my G. Okay, I got my G. A little bit of manipulation outside of just finger stretch, but I got the G. Okay. Okay, F, E, E flat, D, D flat, C. Well, it's an octave. I'm not going to get farther than an octave. I can. And I'll explain that in a second. But based on this positioning, I'm not going to be able to do it. Okay. So, 5 to the thumb was a C. Okay. The 1 from the 5 was a G. Okay. Now, this actually makes a little bit of sense, right? Or a whole lot of sense, rather, is that when I stretch out my 5, I can only get an octave from the thumb. That's because this is a lot smaller, right, of a stretching area than 2nd to thumb. I mean, look at the size of that, right? So that, of course, that makes sense. That if my thumb has to stretch, it's going to be a lot easier to stretch from here than it is to stretch from this area. This is key because this area is what you want to be focusing on in terms of 1 to 5 stretch, okay? When we learn the piano initially, and when we teach kids to play initially, what we tell them oftentimes to do is go to the piano and find a 5-finger hand position and the key is C, right? 9 times out of 10, this is where pianists start. So they're here, and they're told to curve their fingers and keep their hands straight, right? And then every once in a while they'll be told, hey, you can reach over to that A. And then what does the student do? They feel like, I don't want to lose this position, right? So I got to reach just that 5th finger over to get to that A. And that's not how we play, really, right? But this is oftentimes where students start. So when pianists, if especially adult pianists, I think, when they're on this stuff really quickly because it's can be kind of boring and they're they have an understanding of more complex music, but sometimes their movements need that slow progression like kids have. They're eager to jump into things with larger stretches, right? This is very normal. But the hand position sometimes they keep like because they've learned this initially, the octave then looks like this, and that's not really the case, right? That's not. And sometimes that can be used, right? Depends on the context of the music. But what we need to start becoming more comfortable with, especially if this is new to you, is approaching the piano this way. Okay? So, I brought this to another pianist last year, and we're talking about how some students have problems with octave stretches and things, and especially in succession, and how I was working with another student, I was teaching them to move this way or to approach the instrument this way, bring all these other fingers with the 5, and then the the thumb over here, and I said, it's kind of like a lobster, you know, thinking of it that way. And she said, oh, that's lion's breath in Tai Chi. This is the lion's breath. And I always thought that was really, really cool sounding. So that's stuck now. It's no longer lobster hands. It is lion's breath. So here you are, lion's breath position, right? And we are going to open our hands this way and bring all the second, the third, the fourth, all over there with the 5, and bring them with bring the thumb on its own. And we're going to use that lion's breath shape there as the primary area of stretch. Okay. Once I do this, what happens then with the forearm is it supinates. You know, there's some movements here. The pronation, right, coming in like this, and then there's the supination coming out. Okay, so what happens with this movement here is that the forearm does a little bit of a rotation toward the 5, a supination, right? And that, I think, is critical for people to understand how to better stretch, right? Stretch. It's more about positioning for larger stretches. If you always approach with a flat forearm, right here, the angle of the wrist always flat, you're never going to reach your potential that you have at the piano. As soon as you start to supinate the forearm, move this way, open up there, and so this angle is now headed down, right? Because of that slight supination of the forearm, that increases your ability to stretch, okay? Much more so than this because, well, I have an equal disbursement of the second, third, the fourth, and fifth fingers, right? But if I start to bring them over and play to the edge of the key more, you can really, really open up your position. So I'm going to use this idea and bring it back to our original stretching exercise and see what I can come up with when I start to manipulate position, okay? And then lastly, the other movement that I want to throw in there is this idea of radial deviation and ulnar, is it ulnar rotation, ulnar extension, something like that. Let me see. It's like, I was just looking at this. Oh, it's deviation. Yeah, it's deviation. Anyway, it's when we do basically this movement. So a radial deviation would be this, right? Moving the thumb toward the radial bone. And then the ulnar deviation, right? So this movement. Okay, and this is critical in scales, in arpeggios. There's a little bit of this in there. This radial deviation on the way down in arpeggios. So when you see people play really quickly up and down the piano, their forearm is not bouncing up and down, twisting around, their upper arm's not moving around. You see just basically this movement, right? But with these subtle radial and ulnar deviations, just this as they move up and down the piano. Forearms pretty steady, very little rotation, supination, and there's these little deviations from this wrist movement, okay? So try to get a good understanding of that movement and how that can manipulate your positioning when we try some more complex positions, okay? So back to our original exercise. Using the left hand here, I'm going to try to get that thumb to move farther up the piano. If I lock each finger into the point, that exact spot on the key, and don't let it move, do not let the forearm move, do not let the wrist move, so no forearm supination, no deviations of the wrist, I'm going to have a hard time stretching that thumb. Barely get to my G. Just hooking around that, right? Luckily, I got a pointy thumb and I can get there. All right, so, but anyway, that's not how I would play that normally. I'm going to use other body mechanics, okay? So, check this out. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to also change positions based on the point of the key that I'm holding down, okay? This is going to allow me to manipulate the position in various ways. So as I travel around, maybe I want my hand here. Maybe I want it back here. Maybe I want my 5 to be on the tip of this key. And this is the understanding, this is what you have to do for a better understanding of positions. So here we go. Thumb up. I'm going to slide in there. Okay, now I'm going to slide all the way back. And then here we go, lion's breath, supinate. Notice how my forearm rotates, okay? Check that out, rotate, right? So you can see a little bit of the inside of my hand. G, super easy, not a problem. Look at that, okay? Slide back up, G sharp, not a problem. A, with a little bit of ulnar deviation. This movement. Okay? So, ulnar deviation and a slight supination. Notice the angle. The angle's headed down here, and the hand is very open here. Okay? Again, if it was just the thumb, stretching just the finger, which is the idea of stretch, right? Finger stretch. I'm going to limit myself and injure myself actually and just not be able to play as well. So the two parts of the equation that I think are frequently missed when we're talking about stretches is radial or wrist movement, right? This deviating movement, and supination, rotation, right? Of the forearm, okay? Critical. When you play octaves, approach them with more of this idea of more space here, right? With a supinated forearm rotation. And I'm not talking about super supinated, but just a little bit, right? To take it out of this always playing with flat wrists, right? Sometimes people think that in order to play with proper positioning, they need to maintain that. And this is so not true. You need to leverage all of your natural body mechanics. Say that again. You need to leverage all of your natural body mechanics to play well at the piano. And these wrist movements and these forearm movements are absolutely critical to unlocking your ability to stretch, to have a wider reach, is a better way to put it, at the piano. Okay? When you approach your octaves, approach them with an open lion's breath position, slightly supinated forearm. If I don't, I can do it, but man, I'm fighting for it. And the tension is, I can't allow myself to do that. The tension is there for sure. It's highly noticeable. It's seizing up. It's super uncomfortable. This is natural, right? So, another thing to think about with radial and ulnar deviations is scale work. So, I'm going to play a little bit of this. There we go. All right, so check us out. You do this when you practice your scales. You do a radial deviation. Here's another. You should be. And if you're not, then you might be supinating, right? Or rotating, right? And then, so let's say you're doing this on your scales. and rotating that forearm over, right? You're not doing your scales right, but you're doing a movement I'm talking about that can be used, just not here. So you may have been trained to get rid of that, right? Stop twisting your forearms or rotating your forearms, right? What you should be doing is a radial deviation. Okay? So you need this movement in your scale work, keeping your forearm pretty still. There's no room really for rotation, supination in our scale work. This is where you want to use your radial movements, okay? Or radial ulnar deviation. So that is places where you're familiar with it, okay? And if you're not, when you open your hands up and you're trying a diminished seventh, you know, you're trying your diminished seventh and it's super challenging for you, likely you're here, right? Your forearm's flat. You're not allowing for supination to happen. So you're approaching, here's my 5 finger, let's stretch them out. And then what needs to happen is let it come down. Let your upper arms come down, let your forearms hang, right? You've probably heard your teacher say this before, if I'm not your teacher. Let your forearms hang and let your wrists or let your elbows hang and let your forearms supinate, right? Almost like the thumbs up in the air, that's right. Okay, so here you are, right? Flat forearms. Let them come down. Let them angle down on toward the ulnar bone. Okay, there they are. Okay. Much easier to make these stretches. Bring your 5th finger on the edge of the key. There's no reason you need to be playing here. I can play there, and I can play with a flatter forearm, but it's not necessary, and it's not leveraging all the body mechanics that make it easier to play. Just feels good to hang out there. This does not. I can still do it, but it doesn't. I can do it because my fingers can stretch there, right? Doesn't mean my natural reach and natural body mechanics should be like that. So again, stretches are important. Finger stretch is important. Being able to figure out how far each finger can stretch when other fingers are kind of locked into position. Important to know, but that is not the only part of the equation. I hope I've driven that point home. Try some of these. If you like this, subscribe to my channel. I'll put out more of these. If you have any questions at all about piano, body mechanics, and all that stuff, or trying to unlock particular passages in your pieces that just seem impossible for whatever reason, I'll take a stab at it. Generally, I think that especially in the first several years of playing the piano, people don't have a full understanding of an ability to unlock their essential body mechanics at the piano. So if you like this, subscribe, throw some comments down there, and I'm happy to address those. Good seeing you.